The axe fell in rhythm with Logan's breath. Split, stack, repeat. Dawn had barely touched the timber when he began, and already sweat darkened his wool shirt despite the mountain cold. This was his life now: wood, coffee, silence. The kind of silence a man earned after walking away from everything that once mattered. His father's pocket watch sat on the cabin shelf, hands frozen at 3:15. Logan never wound it anymore. Some things were meant to stay broken. The scream shattered the morning like glass. Logan's axe stopped mid-swing. A woman's voice, raw with terror, coming from the north ridge where the old trappers used to work. Every instinct told him to keep walking, to stay out of it. Nothing good came from other people's trouble. But his feet were already moving forward. The coffee would go cold. The wood could wait. Some sounds you couldn't ignore. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. When he began, and already sweat darkened his wool shirt despite the mountain cold. This was his life now: wood, coffee, silence. The kind of silence a man earned after walking away from everything that once mattered. His father's pocket watch sat on the cabin shelf, hands frozen at 3:15. Logan never wound it anymore. Some things were meant to stay broken. The scream shattered the morning like glass. Logan's axe stopped mid-swing. A woman's voice, raw with terror, coming from the north ridge where the old trappers used to work. Every instinct told him to keep walking, to stay out of it. Nothing good came from other people's trouble. But his feet were already moving forward. The coffee would go cold. The wood could wait. Some sounds you couldn't ignore. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the town materialized through the pines like something from a fever dream. Weathered storefronts, hitching posts, the white steeple of the church piercing blue sky. Logan shifted hope's weight in his aching arms, feeling every step of the hour-long descent in his burning shoulders. She'd stopped trembling somewhere around the halfway point, gone quiet and still in a way that worried him more than her earlier shaking. Main Street stretched before them, dusty and ordinary in the midday sun. Logan's boots hit the boardwalk, and the hollow thump brought faces to windows. The blacksmith looked up from his forge. Two women outside the general store froze mid-conversation, mouths forming perfect O's of shock. Within minutes, a crowd gathered. It started with the curious shopkeepers stepping into doorways, children abandoning their games. Then came the concerned citizens, the righteous ones who'd been at the auction yesterday, watching with tight lips as 4 women were sold like cattle before the auctioneer fled town. Hope tensed in Logan's arms as the circle tightened around them, her small hand fisting in his shirt. "That's her," someone murmured. "The last one. Number 4. Sheriff Burrell pushed through, his weathered face grave beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Gray hair, gray eyes, gray duster coat. Everything about him spoke of a man worn down by seeing too much wrong and fixing too little of it. "Logan, set her down. Let Doc Bennett have a look." "I'm fine," Hope said, but her voice came out thin as paper. Logan lowered her carefully to the bench outside the general store. Doc Bennett, leather bag already in hand, knelt beside her with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd tended everything from gunshot wounds to birthing babies. He examined her ankles, bruised but unbroken, checked her pupils, asked questions in a gentle voice while his hand stayed clinical, professional. The crowd pressed closer. "Where are the men who brought her, Mrs.?" Henley demanded, pushing to the front. She was a formidable woman, the preacher's wife, with the kind of maternal authority that could shame grown men into confession. "The auction house men." "Gone," Sheriff Burrell said. "Cleared out last night after they made their money. Left the women behind like unwanted baggage." A murmur rippled through the crowd: anger, disgust, helplessness. Logan recognized the feeling. It was the same one that had driven him into these mountains 3 years ago. The understanding that the world was full of wrongs too big for one man to fix. "The other 3 women," someone asked. "Claimed by their buyers this morning," the sheriff said, and the crowd's anger shifted into something uglier, more complicated. Legal sales. However much we might despise it, territorial law says, territorial law is bought and paid for. A man spat. The lawyer, a thin fellow named Morrison who handled land deeds and wills, stepped forward. He carried the air of a man about to deliver bad news. The auction was illegal, yes, but it happened. The women were sold. Without legal challenge at the time. Those sales stand. His eyes found hope. This young woman, however, she was purchased but never claimed. The buyer paid, then apparently disappeared. That makes her status complicated. Complicated how? Logan heard himself ask. Morrison's expression turned apologetic. Under territorial commerce law, she's considered unclaimed merchandise. Without a buyer to take possession, and with no family to claim her, she becomes a ward of the court, which means she'll be sold again. Mrs. Henley finished, her face flushing with outrage. You're saying because that bastard buyer ran off, she has to go through this nightmare twice, unless someone takes responsibility for her? Morrison said quietly. The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Logan felt it building, felt every eye in the crowd turn toward him. He'd been the one to find her, the one to carry her into town, the one standing here now, still close enough that she could reach out and touch him if she wanted. Mr. Tate, Morrison continued, his voice careful. By rescuing this young woman and bringing her to town, you've effectively assumed a degree of liability. In the eyes of the court, you're the only person with standing to what? Logan's voice came out sharper than intended. To claim her, the lawyer said simply. Through marriage. It's the only legal avenue that would protect her from being returned to court custody and resold. The crowd erupted, some voices supportive, others skeptical, all of them certain this was the obvious solution. Logan stood frozen, hearing the words but unable to process them. Marriage. To a stranger. A girl whose real name he didn't even know. No. Hope's voice cut through the noise, quiet but firm. She stood, wavering slightly, and faced the crowd. He didn't buy me. He helped me. There's a difference. Mrs. Henley's expression softened. We know, dear, but the law doesn't care about the difference. If you're not claimed by week's end, you'll be sent to Charleston, put back in that auction house. And then I'll go. Hope's chin lifted. I won't trap this man into... It's not a trap if I choose it, Logan said, surprising himself. Hope turned to him, those dark eyes searching his face for something truth, maybe, or ulterior motive. You don't even know me. I know you were caught in a bear trap set by men who treat people like property. I know you didn't scream until you were alone, which means you're stronger than you look. And I know... He stopped, aware of dozens of ears listening. I know you deserve better than being sold twice. The crowd held its breath. Reverend Michael stepped forward, prayer book already in hand. I can perform the ceremony today. Right now, if you're both willing. It would be legal, binding, and it would protect this young woman from further indignity. Logan looked at Hope. Hope looked back. In her eyes, he saw fear and exhaustion and something else, a terrible, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this stranger with sawdust in his hair might be different from the men who'd hurt her. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Logan echoed, and the crowd pressed in closer, already planning a wedding. Worried him more than her earlier shaking. Main Street stretched before them, dusty and ordinary in the midday sun. Logan's boots hit the boardwalk, and the hollow thump brought faces to windows. The blacksmith looked up from his forge. Two women outside the general store froze mid-conversation, mouths forming perfect O's of shock. Within minutes, a crowd gathered. It started with the curious shopkeepers stepping into doorways, children abandoning their games. Then came the concerned citizens, the righteous ones, who'd been at the auction yesterday, watching with tight lips as four women were sold like cattle before the auctioneer fled town. Hope tensed in Logan's arms as the circle tightened around them, her small hand fisting in his shirt. "That's her," someone murmured. "The last one? Number 4. Sheriff Burl pushed through, his weathered face grave. Beneath his wide-brimmed hat, gray hair, gray eyes, gray duster coat, everything about him spoke of a man worn down by seeing too much wrong and fixing too little of it. "Logan, set her down. Let Doc Bennett have a look." "I'm fine," Hope said. Voice came out thin as paper. Logan lowered her carefully to the bench outside the general store. Doc Bennett, leather bag already in hand, knelt beside her with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd tended everything from gunshot wounds to birthing babies. He examined her ankles, bruised but unbroken, checked her pupils, asked questions in a gentle voice while his hands stayed clinical, professional. The crowd pressed closer. "Where are the men who brought her, Mrs.?" Henley demanded, pushing to the front. She was a formidable woman, the preacher's wife, with the kind of maternal authority that could shame grown men into confession. "The auction house men." "Gone," Sheriff Burl said. "Cleared out last night after they made their money. Left the women behind like unwanted baggage." A murmur rippled through the crowd, anger, disgust, helplessness. Logan recognized the feeling. It was the same one that had driven him into these mountains 3 years ago. The understanding that the world was full of wrongs too big for one man to fix. "The other 3 women," someone asked. "Claimed by their buyers this morning," the sheriff said. And the crowd's anger shifted into something uglier, more complicated. "Legal sales, however much we might despise it. Territorial law says territorial law is bought and paid for." A man spat, the lawyer, a thin fellow, named Morrison, who handled land deeds and wills, stepped forward. He carried the air of a man about to deliver bad news. "The auction was illegal, yes, but it happened. The women were sold without legal challenge at the time. Those sales stand." His eyes found hope. "This young woman, however, she was purchased but never claimed. The buyer paid, then apparently disappeared. That makes her status, complicated." "Complicated how?" Logan heard himself. Morrison's expression turned apologetic. "Under territorial commerce law, she's considered unclaimed merchandise. Without a buyer to take possession, and with no family to claim her, she becomes a ward of the court. Which means she'll be sold again." "Mrs. Henley finished, her face flushing with outrage. "You're saying because that bastard buyer ran off, she has to go through this nightmare twice, unless someone takes responsibility for her," Morrison said quietly. The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Logan felt it building. Felt every eye in the crowd turn towards him. He'd been the one to find her, the one to carry her into town, the one standing here now, still close enough that she could reach out and touch him if she wanted. "Tate," Morrison continued, his voice careful. "By rescuing this young woman and bringing her to town, you've effectively assumed a degree of liability. In the eyes of the court, you're the only person with standing." "To what?" Logan's voice came out sharper than intended. The lawyer said simply. "Through marriage. It's the only legal avenue that would protect her from being returned to court custody and resold." The crowd erupted, some voices supportive, others skeptical, all of them certain this was the obvious solution. Logan stood frozen, hearing the words but unable to process them. Marriage. To a stranger. A girl whose real name he didn't even know. "No." Hope's voice cut through the noise, quiet but firm. She stood, wavering slightly, and faced the crowd. "He didn't buy me. He helped me. There's a difference." Henley's expression softened. "We know, dear, but the law doesn't care about the difference. If you're not claimed by week's end, you'll be sent to Charleston, put back in that auction house, and then I'll go." Chin lifted. "I won't trap this man into what it's not a trap if I choose it," Logan said. Surprising himself? Hope turned to him, those dark eyes searching, his face for maybe or ulterior motive. You don't even know me. I know you were caught in a bear trap set by men who treat people like property. I know you didn't scream until you were alone, which means you're stronger than you look. And I know, he stopped, aware of dozens of ears listening. I know you deserve better than being sold. Twice! The crowd held its breath. Reverend Michaels stepped forward, prayer book already in hand. I can perform the ceremony today, right now, if you're both willing. It would be legal, binding, and it would protect this young woman from further indignity. Logan looked at Hope. Hope looked back. In her eyes, he saw fear and exhaustion and something else, a terrible, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, stranger with sawdust in his hair might be different from the men who'd hurt her. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Logan echoed, and the crowd pressed in closer, already planning a... The church smelled of beeswax and old hymn books. Afternoon light filtered through the single stained glass window, a gift from some Eastern congregation that had sent it west with prayers for the frontier's salvation. Logan stood at the altar in his only clean shirt, collar starched, stiff enough to saw wood. His hands felt too large, too rough for the moment. Working hands, killing hands, once, now just empty. Hope entered on Mrs. Henley's arm, and Logan's breath caught. The borrowed dress was calico blue with small white flowers, and it fit her poorly. Too loose in the shoulders, too short at the ankles. But Mrs. Henley had pinned a white ribbon at the waist, and someone had woven wildflowers into Hope's dark hair. She looked young, terribly young, and terrified, though she held her chin high. Their eyes met across the small sanctuary. Logan tried to offer something reassurance, apology, he didn't know what. She gave him the smallest nod. Permission, perhaps, or resignation. Reverend Michaels opened his worn prayer book. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God. The words washed over Logan like river water, familiar but distant. He'd heard them before, at his parents' renewal of vows, back when he'd believed in such things, before the war, before he'd learned that vows meant nothing when the world caught fire. Do you, Logan Tate, take this woman? I do. His voice came out rougher than intended. And do you? The Reverend paused, glancing at Hope with gentle concern. What name shall I use? Child. Hope's fingers tightened on the small bouquet Mrs. Henley had pressed into her hands. They changed it, at the auction house. I don't want that name anymore. Silence filled the church. Logan saw her throat work, saw the shame rising in her cheeks. Then you'll choose a new one, Logan said quietly. After, we'll choose together. Reverend Michael smiled. Do you, daughter of God's grace, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward? I do. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried. The ring was simple brass, bought from the general store for 35 cents. Logan had polished it with wood ash until it gleamed. It slid onto her finger too large. She curled her hand into a fist to keep it from falling off. I now pronounce you man and wife. Reverend Michaels closed the book. May Providence watch over you both, and may you find in each other what was lost. Logan didn't kiss her. It seemed wrong, somehow, presumptuous. She was his wife by law and necessity, not by choice or affection. They stood there awkwardly until Mrs. Henley bustled forward with a cloth bundle. For you, dear, she said, pressing it into Hope's arms. Just a few things to help you start. There's a shawl my mother made wool, warm for mountain nights, and a hairbrush, and some soap. Lavender, I make it myself. Hope's eyes went bright with tears. Thank you. I can't repay you. Nonsense. Welcome to our community. Mrs. Tate. Mrs. Henley patted her cheek. "You come to church circle when you're ready. The ladies will be glad to know you." The wagon ride to the lumber camp took an hour. Logan drove in silence, hyper-aware of the woman beside him on the narrow bench. She sat carefully, hands folded over the bundle in her lap, staring at the pine forest rising on either side of the rutted road. Once, she flinched when an owl called from the trees. Logan almost reached for her hand, then thought better of it. "What did you say to a stranger you'd just married?" The cabin appeared as they rounded the final bend, small and rough-hewn, with oiled paper covering the windows and a stone chimney trailing wood smoke into the evening air. Logan saw it suddenly through her eyes, isolated, crude, a bachelor's shelter barely fit for human habitation. "It's not much," he said, pulling the horses to a stop. "But it's sound. Roof doesn't leak, and the stove draws clean." Hope climbed down before he could help her, clutching Mrs. Henley's bundle like a shield. She stood in the clearing, studying the cabin, the workshop lean-to, the small vegetable garden gone to weeds. "How long have you lived here?" 3 years, since I came up from Colorado." He unhitched the horses, giving his hands something to do. "I know it's rough. You deserve better than this." "Better than freedom." She turned to look at him, and something in her eyes made his chest tighten. "Better than a man who didn't buy me." Logan had no answer to that. Inside, he lit the coal oil lamp on the table, and warm light filled the single room. Hope moved slowly, taking inventory. The Franklin stove with its warming shelf, the rope bed frame with its corn-husk mattress and hand-stitched quilt stars in blue and white, his mother's work, the only soft thing he owned, the table he'd built from split logs, 2 chairs, a shelf with a few dishes, a tin of coffee, the broken pocket watch, the root cellar door in the floor. "There's a loft," Logan said, gesturing to the ladder in the corner. "I'll sleep up there. You take the bed." "No." Hope set down her bundle on the table. "I'll take the loft. You're too tall for it anyway." "I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask. I'm telling you." Her voice was firm. "I won't displace you in your own home, Mr. Tate. We may be married, but we're still strangers. There has to be some proper arrangement." Logan nodded slowly. "All right. If you're certain." "I am." He made coffee to fill the silence, ground the beans with the hand-crank grinder, set the pot on the stove, found 2 blue enamelware cups. They sat across from each other at the table, steam rising between them like a fragile barrier. "At the auction house," Hope said finally, staring into her cup. "They gave us new names. Said we'd fetch better prices with civilized names. Mine was—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I don't want to say it. I don't want to carry it." "Then don't." Logan wrapped both hands around his cup. "Choose something else. I can't just— Can I? Why not fresh start? Fresh name." He thought about it, about the moment in the woods when he'd heard her cry out. "What about Hope?" She looked up, startled. "Hope. It's what I felt when I found you. Hope that I wasn't too late, that I could do one decent thing." He met her eyes. "Seems fitting." For a long moment, she was silent. Then she smiled small, tentative, but real. "Hope Tate. Yes. I think I can be her." "Then that's who you are." They finished their coffee as darkness settled over the mountains. Logan showed her the loft, a narrow space beneath the rafters, barely tall enough to sit up in, but private. He'd laid down an old blanket as bedding, and she spread Mrs. Henley's shawl over it like a quilt. "Good night, Mr. Tate," she said from the top of the ladder. "Logan. Just Logan. Good night, Logan." He banked the fire in the stove and lay down on the bed, his mother's quilt rough against his cheek. Above him, he could hear Hope's quiet breathing, the rustle of fabric as she settled. His wife. A woman whose true name he'd learned only hours ago. A woman he'd vowed to protect, though he had no idea how. Outside, the wind moved through the pines like whispered prayers. Logan closed his eyes and tried not to think about the brass ring on her finger, or the trust in her voice when she'd said his name. Some vows, he thought, might be worth keeping after all. Hope woke to silence. Not the oppressive silence of the auction house cellar, but something different, the quiet of a place where someone had deliberately tried not to wake her. She lay still in the loft, wrapped in Mrs. Henley's wool shawl, listening. Below, the Franklin stove ticked as it cooled. Outside, an axe bit into wood with steady rhythm. She descended the ladder carefully, bare feet cold on the rough plank floor. The cabin was empty but felt inhabited in a way it hadn't the night before. Logan had banked the coals before leaving, left the coffee pot on the warming shelf with a tin cup beside it. A small kindness. The kind that said, "I thought of you." Hope poured coffee and stood at the window, watching through the wavy, oiled paper as Logan worked. His shirt was already dark with sweat despite the morning chill, and he moved with the unconscious grace of a man who'd spent years at hard labor. Split, stack, split, stack. A rhythm as reliable as heartbeat. She turned back to explore the cabin properly. In daylight, she could see details she'd missed. The table's joints, perfectly fitted. The shelf brackets, carved with simple notches. Everything built by hand, built to last. This was a man who valued permanence, even if he claimed not to need it. The Bible sat on the highest shelf, dust thick on its leather cover. Hope pulled it down carefully, opened to the front page. Inscribed in careful feminine script, Eleanor Tate, "May the Lord guide your steps." 1847, his mother, the woman who'd made the star quilt, who'd sent her son west with scripture and prayers. Hope wondered what Eleanor Tate would think of this arrangement, her son married to a stranger out of necessity rather than love. Beside the Bible sat the pocket watch. Hope lifted it gently. Silver case, badly tarnished. The crystal cracked. She pressed the catch, and it opened to reveal the frozen hands. 3:15. She turned it over. Engraved on the back, "Thomas Tate, for faithful service." "That was my father's." Hope startled, nearly dropping the watch. Logan stood in the doorway, breathing hard from his work. Sawdust caught in his dark hair. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have." "It's all right. It's broken anyway." He crossed to the water bucket, dipped the ladle, drank deeply. Confederate artillery shell landed near him at Shiloh. The watch stopped. He didn't. Kept working for 2 more years before his heart gave out. Logan set down the ladle. "I keep thinking I should get it fixed. Never do." "Why not?" He was quiet for a moment, studying the watch in her hands. "Maybe some things are supposed to stay broken. Reminder of what was." Hope closed the watch carefully and placed it back on the shelf. "Or maybe some things are worth repairing." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or recognition. They were both broken things, trying to figure out if repair was possible. "I should let you work," Hope said. "I don't want to keep you from—" "Actually," Logan interrupted, "I was hoping you might want to learn a few things. About the cabin, how things work here." He gestured toward the cast-iron hand pump in the corner. "That pump's temperamental, takes a certain touch." Hope followed him over. The pump stood in a wooden frame, its handle worn smooth from use. Logan worked it a few times, and water splashed into the tin basin below. "You have to prime it first thing in the morning. Pour a cup of water down the top, then pump steady. Not too fast or it'll lose pressure. He stepped back, and Hope took the handle. It resisted at first, then gave with a rusty squeak. Water spurted, then flowed clean and cold. "That's it," Logan said. "You've got it." She pumped until the basin was full, oddly pleased by this small competence. What else? They spent the morning like that, Logan teaching, Hope learning, how to adjust the stove's damper for even heat, where he kept the wood ash soap for washing dishes, how to trim the kerosene lamp wick so it wouldn't smoke. Small domestic mysteries, solved one by one. "You don't have to do all this," Logan said finally, watching her fold flour sack towels with careful precision. "I didn't marry you to get a housekeeper. I know." Hope smoothed the last towel flat. "But I need to do something. I can't just exist here. I need to be useful." "You are useful. You're—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "You're here. That's enough." But it wasn't enough for Hope. She found his mending basket rough-woven willow, filled with shirts that needed buttons and socks with holes worn through. She held up a shirt, examining the torn shoulder seam. "May I?" Logan nodded slowly. "Thread and needles are in there. Darning egg, too. For the socks." Hope settled at the table with the mending, and Logan returned to his work outside. Through the window, she watched him move between the timber and the workshop, carrying tools, measuring boards. A solitary life, until yesterday. Now interrupted by her presence, a presence he claimed to want, though she couldn't quite believe it. Around midday, Logan came in and nodded toward the door. "Want to see something?" He led her behind the cabin to a small plot of land bordered by split-rail fencing, the vegetable garden, or what had been a garden once. Now it was mostly weeds and neglect, a few struggling bean plants climbing crooked poles, squash vines sprawling wild and untended. "I'm no farmer," Logan admitted. "I plant things, then forget to tend them properly. Too busy with the timber work." Hope knelt in the dirt, pulling a handful of chickweed from around a tomato plant. The soil was good, dark and rich. The plants weren't dead, just desperate for attention. "This could be beautiful." "You think so?" "I know so." She sat back on her heels, already planning. "It just needs care. Regular care." Logan crouched beside her, and she was suddenly aware of how close he was, close enough to see the flecks of green in his gray eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow, close enough to smell sawdust and sweat and something else, something essentially him. "Would you want to," he asked, "take care of it? I mean, it could be yours, your project." "I'd like that." Hope pulled another weed, then another. Her hands remembered this work childhood summers in her father's garden, before everything fell apart, before she'd become something to be sold. "Logan, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you come here to the mountains? I mean, you said you drifted for years." He was quiet, still crouched beside her, fingers digging absently in the soil. "After my father died, I didn't have much reason to stay in Missouri. My younger brother married, started his own family. Didn't need me around, so I moved, kept moving, worked ranches in Kansas, silver mines in Colorado, never stayed anywhere long." He glanced at the cabin, the timber stands beyond. "Then I came here 3 years ago. Something about these mountains. They felt like a place where a man could stop running. From what? Himself, mostly." Logan stood, offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. "I wasn't a good man. Hope. During the war, after it, I did things I'm not proud of. We all have things we're not proud of. Not like mine." Hope brushed dirt from her skirt, the borrowed calico already showing signs of wear. "I was dismissed from my position as governess because the lady of the house thought I was after her husband. I wasn't, but he'd been persistent. And when she found him in my room one night, she chose to believe I'd invited him." She met Logan's eyes. I wasn't given a chance to defend myself. They put me out with no references, no wages owed. I had nowhere to go. The auction house found me sleeping in a church doorway. Logan's jaw tightened. That's not shame. That's what was done to you. And what was done to you in the war. That's different. Is it? They stood there in the weedy garden, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders, both carrying their separate guilts like stones. Finally, Logan shook his head. We should eat something. I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage salt pork and beans. Dinner was simple salt pork fried crisp, beans from the barrel soaked and boiled, cornbread Hope made from the sourdough starter she found in a clay crock on the shelf. They ate at the table, passing the food between them. And slowly, carefully, they began to talk about safer things. The weather, the timber market, the town's small scandals. Are you afraid of me? Logan asked suddenly, setting down his fork. Hope considered the question. No. Why not? Most women would be alone with a stranger, a man who... You have gentle hands, she said, remembering how carefully he'd pried open the bear trap, how he'd carried her like she might break. And you didn't have to marry me. You could have walked away. Not really. The town would have. The town wasn't there in the woods. Just you. And you chose to help. Hope traced the grain of the wooden table with one finger. That tells me who you are. Maybe better than you know yourself. Logan opened his mouth to respond, but movement caught his eye. A gray cat, lean and scarred from barn living, had slipped through the door and was eyeing the salt pork with unmistakable intent. Don't even think about it, Logan warned. The cat thought about it, then moved with lightning speed, snatching a piece of bacon from Logan's plate and bolting for the door. Hope burst out laughing, genuine, surprised laughter that rang through the cabin like bells. Logan stared at her, then started laughing too, deep and rusty, like a mechanism that hadn't been used in years. That damn cat, he said, wiping his eyes. Does that every time I leave the door open? Maybe you should feed him. I do. He's just greedy. They finished dinner still smiling, and Hope washed the dishes in the tin basin while Logan trimmed the lamp wick for evening. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and rose. Hope dried the last crockery bowl and set it on the shelf, and something shifted inside her, subtle but unmistakable. This cabin, this man, this life. Maybe it could become hers. Maybe she could learn to belong here. Thank you, she said quietly. Logan looked up from the lamp. For what? For today. For teaching me things. For... She searched for the right words. For making this feel less like a sentence and more like a second chance. He nodded slowly, something like relief crossing his face. That's what I was hoping for both of us. That night, as Hope climbed to the loft and Logan settled beneath his mother's quilt, the cabin felt different than it had the night before. Less like a prison, more like a possibility. Above them, through the chinks in the roof, stars wheeled slowly across the mountain sky. And below, two broken people slept a little easier, knowing they weren't quite so alone anymore. A week into their marriage, Logan found Hope in the timber stand, watching him work. She'd walked the half-mile from the cabin with a pail wrapped in cloth lunch. He realized something no one had brought him in 3 years. Thought you might be hungry, she said, setting the pail on a stump. It's just bread and cheese, but it's perfect. Logan drove the axe into the log he'd been splitting and wiped sweat from his forehead with his shirt sleeve. You didn't have to walk all this way. I wanted to see what you do out here. Hope surveyed the clearing, the neat stacks of timber. The two-man crosscut saw hanging from a branch, the chalk marks on logs marking them for cutting. It's impressive. All this work, Logan shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. Just lumber. Nothing special. It's honest work. That's special enough. They sat on a fallen log and shared the lunch. The bread was better than anything Logan had managed. Hope had figured out the temperamental sourdough starter and coaxed it into something light and flavorful. The cheese came from town, sharp and crumbly. "Could you teach me," Hope asked suddenly, "about the timber work?" Logan paused mid-bite. "It's hard labor, heavy. I'm stronger than I look." She met his eyes with that quiet determination he was learning to recognize. "And I want to understand what you do, how you spend your days." So he taught her how to read the grain of wood, where to notch for clean splits, how to swing the smaller axe, not the 8-pound felling axe he used, but the lighter hatchet for kindling. Hope proved a quick learner, her movements careful and precise. When she successfully split her first log clean through, her face lit with genuine pride. "Look at that," Logan said, impressed despite himself. Natural talent, or desperation to be useful. But she was smiling. They worked together through the afternoon, and Logan found himself talking more than he had in years, explaining techniques, telling stories about difficult cuts, trees that fought back. Hope listened intently, asked questions that showed she was actually hearing him, not just being polite. When she brought him water from the pail, her hand brushed his, and Logan felt something shift, subtle as a change in wind direction, but unmistakable. This woman who'd been forced into his life was becoming part of it, weaving herself into the daily fabric in ways he hadn't anticipated. "We should go to town tomorrow," Logan said as they walked back to the cabin in the evening light. "Need supplies, flour's running low, and I could use some nails." Hope's step faltered slightly, but she recovered. "All right. You don't have to come. I could go alone if—" "No." Her voice was firm. "I'm your wife. I should be seen with you. Let people know. Let them know this is real." The next morning, they hitched the horses to the wagon. Mrs. Henley's gift, a sunbonnet with a wide brim and a ribbon that tied under the chin, sat on Hope's head, shading her face from the early sun. She'd mended one of Logan's better shirts, and he wore it with his suspenders fastened properly for once, the brass buttons catching light. The ride into town took an hour. Hope sat straight back beside him, hands folded in her lap, but Logan could see the tension in her shoulders. This would be her first time back since the wedding, her first time facing the town as Mrs. Logan Tate instead of the auction girl. Main Street was busy with Saturday morning traffic. Wagons lined the hitching posts, and townspeople moved between the general store, the feed supply, and the bank. Logan helped Hope down from the wagon, and immediately felt eyes turning toward them. "Head high," he murmured. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of." "I know," but her hand tightened on his arm. They walked together into the general store, where the bell above the door announced their arrival. Mr. Patterson, the proprietor, looked up from his ledger and smiled. "Logan, Mrs. Tate, good to see you both." "Morning, Patterson." Logan pulled out the list Hope had written in careful script. "Need to stock up." While Patterson gathered their order, 50 pounds of flour, 20 of sugar, coffee, salt, baking powder. Hope wandered the store. Logan watched her pause at the fabric display, fingers trailing over a bolt of calico, yellow with tiny blue flowers. She moved on without taking it. "Mrs. Tate," Mrs. Henley bustled in, followed by 2 other church ladies. "How wonderful to see you, dear. We've been meaning to call, but didn't want to intrude on your settling in." "That's kind of you." Hope's voice was steady, polite. "The ladies' circle meets Thursday afternoons at the church," Mrs. D. Henley continued. "We'd be delighted if you'd join us. We quilt, share recipes, catch up on news. It's a lovely way to get to know everyone." Logan saw Hope's hesitation, the quick calculation behind her eyes. "That's very generous," she said carefully. "But I'm still learning my way around the household. Perhaps in a few weeks." "Of course, dear, whenever you're ready." Mrs. T. Henley patted her arm. "The invitation stands." As the ladies departed in a flutter of skirts and gossip, Logan leaned close to Hope. "You didn't have to decline. If you want to go, I'm not ready yet." Hope watched the women through the window. They're kind, but they're still strangers, and I'm still the girl from the auction to them, no matter what I do. Give them time. Give yourself time. They were loading supplies into the wagon when a young man on a fine Morgan horse rode up. He was perhaps 25, well-dressed in a clean shirt and vest, with the easy confidence of someone born to prosperity. "Logan," he said, tipping his hat. Then, with careful courtesy, "Mrs. Tate." "Rivers," Logan acknowledged. Clayton Rivers owned the second largest ranch in the territory, inherited from his father. Good man, by all accounts. Too good, maybe, with his Harvard education and his Eastern manners. "I heard about your marriage. Congratulations." Rivers' smile seemed genuine. "If you need anything extra hands for timber work, supplies, just let me know." "Appreciate it." Logan's hand found Hope's waist, a gesture more possessive than he'd intended. "We're managing fine." Rivers nodded, tipped his hat again to Hope, who acknowledged him with a slight smile and rode on. Logan helped Hope onto the wagon seat, aware of a strange tightness in his chest. Jealousy, protectiveness, he couldn't quite name it. "He seems nice," Hope said as they started home. "He is, but you don't like him." "I like him fine. He's just different, refined, the kind of man who'd know how to treat a woman properly." Hope turned to look at him. "And you don't—" "I'm a lumberjack." "Hope." "I work with my hands, sleep in a cabin I built myself, eat beans more nights than not. Rivers has servants, a big house, education. He's what you should have had." "I didn't marry him," Hope said quietly. "I married you." They rode in silence for a while. Then Hope spoke again, softer. "Logan, could we stop at the general store once more? There's something I forgot." Back in town, Hope disappeared into the store while Logan waited with the horses. She emerged with a small paper packet, which she tucked into her pocket without explanation. Only later, when they were unloading supplies at the cabin, did Logan see what she'd bought: seed packets, hollyhocks, morning glories, flowers. "For the garden," she explained, catching his glance. I thought it would be nice to have something beautiful, something that's just for beauty, not usefulness." Logan pulled a small leather pouch from his coat. "Here, for the seeds, and anything else you want." Hope opened it, found $2 silver and some smaller coins inside. "Logan, I can't—" "It's your household money. You should have your own funds." He pressed it into her hand. "Buy what you need, what you want. It's yours." That evening, after a dinner of venison stew Hope had made with the Dutch oven, they sat by the fire. Logan had carved a set of wooden checkers, and they played on a board he'd drawn on a piece of planed wood. Hope was terrible at checkers, but she laughed at her own mistakes, and Logan found himself laughing with her. "I need to tell you something," Hope said as Logan jumped 3 of her pieces in succession. "About before the auction house." Logan set down the checker piece. "You don't have to." "I want to." She stared at the fire, flames reflecting in her dark eyes. "I told you I was a governess. What I didn't say was that I loved those children. 2 girls, 8 and 10. I taught them reading, arithmetic, piano. For 2 years, they were almost like my own daughters." Her voice went tight. "The father, Mr. Whitmore, he started noticing me, complimenting my hair, my dress, standing too close. I tried to avoid him, but the house was only so big." Logan's hands curled into fists. "One night he came to my room, said he just wanted to talk. I told him to leave. We were arguing. I was trying to get him out when Mrs. Whitmore appeared." Hope's laugh was bitter. "She saw us and decided I was the seductress. Threw me out that night. No wages, no references, no chance to say goodbye to the girls. That wasn't your fault. I know, but I spent weeks believing I'd somehow invited it. Hope finally looked at him. The auction house found me in Charleston, sleeping behind a church. They said they'd give me food and shelter while I looked for work. By the time I realized what they really were, it was too late. Logan wanted to say something, anything that would ease the pain in her voice. Instead, he offered the only thing he had, truth for truth. "My younger brother's name was Henry," he said slowly. "After the war, he got mixed up with some bad men, needed money, needed help, asked me to vouch for him with a creditor. I refused, told him he'd made his choices, had to live with them." Logan stared at his hands. 2 months later, he was dead, shot trying to rob a bank those men convinced him would be easy money. Oh, Logan. I walked away when he needed me, told myself it was the right thing letting him face consequences, but really, I was just angry. Angry at the world, at the war, at everything, and I took it out on him. Logan met her eyes. "So when you talk about shame, about guilt, I understand. Better than you might think." Hope reached across the checkerboard and took his hand. Her palm was warm, calloused from garden work, real and alive. "We're a pair, aren't we? Both carrying ghosts. Maybe that's why this works. Neither of us expects the other to be perfect." They sat like that, hands joined, fire crackling, until the coals burned low. Outside, an owl called from the pines, and somewhere distant, a coyote answered. The mountain night settled around the cabin like a blanket, and inside, 2 wounded people found comfort in their shared brokenness. When Hope climbed to the loft that night, she paused at the top of the ladder. "Logan, yeah. Thank you for listening, for not judging. Same to you." In the darkness, Logan heard her settle into her blankets, heard her breathing slow into sleep. He lay beneath his mother's quilt, thinking about trust, how fragile it was, how slowly it grew, how Hope was beginning to offer it to him in small, precious pieces, and how terrified he was of breaking it. 3 weeks into their marriage, Logan was splitting kindling behind the cabin when he heard the buggy approaching. The sound was wrong, too smooth, too refined for the rough mountain road. He set down the axe and walked around to the front clearing, wiping wood dust from his hands. The buggy that emerged from the pine shadows was expensive lacquered black with brass fittings, pulled by a matched pair of bays that had never seen hard labor. The man driving wore a black silk top hat and a suit that cost more than Logan made in 6 months. A gold watch chain glinted across his vest. Logan's gut tightened. He knew trouble when he saw it. The man pulled the horses to a stop and climbed down with practiced ease, adjusting his hat and surveying the cabin with barely concealed disdain. "Mr. Logan Tate." "That's right." Logan stayed where he was, arms crossed. "And you are Silas Blackwood, representative of the Western Territories Auction and Employment Company." He pulled a leather portfolio from the buggy. "I believe you have someone that belongs to my clients." "I don't have anything that belongs to anyone." "Come now, Mr. Tate. Let's be civilized about this." Blackwood opened the portfolio, extracted a document with an official-looking seal. "I have here a bill of sale for one female indentured servant, purchased at our Charleston facility on the 14th of September. The buyer paid in full $300, but the merchandise was not delivered due to unfortunate circumstances." "Merchandise?" Logan's voice went flat and dangerous. "You're talking about my wife." "Your wife." Blackwood's smile was cold as winter iron. "According to my records, the individual in question was legally sold under binding contract. Any subsequent arrangements don't supersede the original transaction. Get off my property." "Mr. Tate, please be reasonable. I'm authorized to offer you 2 options. Either return the girl and we'll consider the matter closed, or pay the $300 owed to the original purchaser. It's quite simple." "Really?" Logan took a step forward, and something in his face made Blackwood step back. "My wife's name is Hope, She's not a girl, not merchandise, and she's not going anywhere. We were married legal and proper by Reverend Michaels with the whole town as witness. Now get back in that fancy buggy and ride out. Before I forget, I'm trying to be a better man." Blackwood's smile faded. "I see. Then I'll be forced to pursue this through territorial courts. A marriage of convenience performed under duress won't hold up legally. Mr. Tate, especially when there is a prior financial claim." He tucked the document back into his portfolio. "You'll be hearing from a judge, and I should warn you, the legal fees alone will cost far more than $300. It would be simpler to settle this now. The only thing getting settled is you getting gone." Logan's hand moved to his belt, where his work knife hung in its sheath. Not a threat, exactly. Just a reminder. Blackwood climbed back into the buggy, gathering the reins with manicured hands that had never done an honest day's work. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Tate. These situations always end badly for men like you. I'll be back with legal authority. And when I am, the woman will be returned to her rightful owner. She's no one's property. We'll let the court decide that." Blackwood turned the buggy in a tight circle. "Good day, Mr. Tate. Give my regards to the merchandise." Logan watched until the buggy disappeared into the trees, then stood there in the clearing, breathing hard, hands shaking with barely controlled rage. He wanted to chase that bastard down, wanted to drag him from that expensive buggy and teach him what real men did to men who bought and sold human beings. But that was the old Logan, the one who'd solved problems with violence, the one who'd failed his brother because anger was easier than wisdom. He turned back toward the cabin and found Hope standing in the doorway. Her face was white as birch bark, flour dusting her apron from the bread she'd been making. She'd heard everything. "Hope, he's going to take me back." Her voice was small, hollow. "He has papers, legal claims. What can we do against that? Nothing's going to happen to you. I won't let it." "How?" She stepped out into the clearing, her hands twisting in her apron. "You heard him, Logan. Courts, judges, legal authority. We don't have $300. We don't have anything. We have the truth. We have a legal marriage." Logan crossed to her, but she backed away, shaking her head. "A marriage you were forced into. A marriage everyone knows was necessity, not choice. The courts won't care about truth, they'll care about money and contracts and—" Her voice broke. "I should have died in that bear trap. Would have been easier for everyone." "Don't say that. Don't even think it." "Why?" Tears spilled down her cheeks now, the first time Logan had seen her cry. "Why do you care? You didn't want this marriage. Didn't want me. The whole town forced you into it. Now I'm just a problem you have to solve, a debt you have to pay. Stop." Logan closed the distance between them, caught her shoulders. "Just stop." Hope tried to pull away, but he held firm, not roughly but with certainty. She fought for a moment, then collapsed against his chest, sobs shaking her whole body. Logan wrapped his arms around her, one hand cradling her head, feeling her tears soak through his shirt. "I'm sorry," she gasped between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I've ruined everything. Your peace, your life, now your money." "Hush." Logan tightened his hold, tucking her head under his chin. She smelled like bread dough and lavender soap and something else, something essentially hope. "You haven't ruined anything. You hear me? Nothing. But the money. I'll find it. Sell timber. Sell tools. Sell the damn cabin if I have to. But you're not going anywhere. Not back to that auction house. Not to any buyer. Not anywhere but here." He pulled back enough to tilt her face up, his calloused hands gentle on her wet cheeks. "This is your home now. You're my wife. And I don't care if it started forced, it's real now. You understand it's real." Hope stared up at him, tears still streaming. "Why? You didn't want this. Didn't want me? I thought I didn't want anyone. Logan brushed tears away with his thumbs, the gesture awkward but sincere. Thought I'd be alone up here until I died, and that seemed right somehow. Punishment for what I'd done, who I'd been. But then you, he struggled for words. You made coffee and mended shirts and planted flowers. You learned to split wood and asked about my parents and laughed at that damn cat. You made this place feel like home instead of exile. Logan, maybe I needed this marriage more than I knew. He continued, the admission costing him. Needed someone to care about. Someone who saw past the rough edges and the mistakes. Someone who trusted me enough to fall asleep in my house, to eat my food, to build a life with me, even though she had every reason not to. Hope reached up slowly, touching his face with trembling fingers. Her hand traced his jaw, rough with stubble, then moved to the scar above his eyebrow. I was so frightened at first, of you, of this place, of everything. But you were patient, kind. You gave me space and time and hope, real hope, not just the name. And you gave me purpose. Logan covered her hand with his, pressing it against his cheek. I've been alone so long I forgot what it meant to have someone matter, to come home and find someone there, to have someone bring lunch to the timber stand just because they thought of me. His voice roughed. You matter. Hope. Maybe more than anything ever has. She made a small sound, half sob, half laugh, and pulled his head down until their foreheads touched. They stood like that in the clearing, holding each other, neither quite ready to name what was growing between them, but both feeling its weight, its truth. What are we going to do? Hope whispered finally. About Blackwood and his claims. I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Logan pulled back, keeping his hands on her shoulders. Together. That's how we do things now. Hope nodded, wiping her eyes with her apron. Together. They went inside, and Logan bolted the door, something he'd never done before. The cabin felt smaller with the threat of Blackwood looming, but also safer, a fortress of two instead of a prison of one. Hope returned to her bread-making while Logan sat at the table, trying to think through their options. $300. It might as well have been $3,000. He had $47 saved in a tin under the floorboards. His timber was worth something, but not enough. The cabin, the tools, even his horses altogether. Maybe they'd reach 200. I have something, Hope said quietly, not looking up from kneading dough. My mother's locket. The only thing they didn't take at the auction house. It's gold. Real gold. With a small pearl inset. It might be worth $50. Maybe $60. No. Logan's voice was firm. We're not selling your mother's locket. It's just a thing. Logan, I'm more important than a thing. You're not sacrificing the last piece of your family for this. We'll find another way. The kerosene lamp flickered, casting shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, crickets sang their evening chorus, oblivious to human troubles. Hope shaped the dough into loaves and set them near the stove to rise, then came to sit across from Logan. When I was little, she said softly, my father used to say that God gives us trials not to break us, but to show us what we're made of. I never understood that until now. And what are we made of? Stronger stuff than we thought. She reached across the table, took his hand. Whatever happens, Logan, I want you to know I'm glad it was you who found me in that trap. Glad it was you who married me. Even if we lose everything, even if the courts decide against us, I'll never regret this. You gave me dignity when everyone else saw property. That's worth more than any amount of money. Logan squeezed her hand, throat tight with emotions he'd thought himself incapable of feeling. We're not losing. Blackwood doesn't know what kind of trouble he just bought himself. Mountain people take care of their own, and whether you like it or not, you're one of us now. One of us, Hope repeated, testing the words. Then she smiled small, but genuine. I like the sound of that. They sat together as darkness fell. Hands joined across the table, making quiet plans and promises. The threat of Blackwood hung over them like storm clouds, but beneath it was something else, something new and fragile and worth fighting for. Neither of them named it yet, but they both felt it growing, root deep and stubborn as mountain pine. And whatever came next, they would face it together. Sheriff Burl arrived 2 days later, his weathered duster coat dusty from the long ride. Logan was in the workshop when he heard the horse, and something in the deliberate slowness of the hoofbeats told him this wasn't a social call. The sheriff dismounted heavily, removed his hat, and stood in the clearing like a man about to deliver bad news to a dying patient. Logan set down his plane and walked out to meet him. "Logan." The sheriff's lined face was grim. "Got something you need to see." Inside the cabin, Hope poured coffee while the sheriff spread a legal document on the table. The paper was heavy stock, stamped with an official seal in red wax. Logan didn't need to read it to know what it meant. "Territorial judge ruled in Blackwood's favor," Sheriff Burl said quietly. "Says the auction house had legal standing under territorial commerce law. The marriage, he ruled it was performed under duress, not valid for purposes of ownership transfer." Ownership transfer. Logan's voice was dangerously soft. That's what he called it. Like she's a horse or a piece of furniture. "I'm sorry, son. I argued against it. But the judge..." The sheriff shook his head. "He's been bought. Everyone knows it. Blackwood's company has money, influence. They make sure judges rule their way." "What are our options?" Hope asked. Her voice was steady, but Logan could see her hand shaking as she held her coffee cup. "You can appeal to the Territorial Supreme Court, but that takes months and costs more than most folks make in a year." Sheriff Burl looked between them. "Or you can pay the $300 by week's end. Blackwood gets his money. The original buyer gets compensated, and Hope stays here as your legal wife. Court will recognize the marriage once the debt's settled. And if we can't pay..." The sheriff's silence was answer enough. He stood, collecting his hat. "I'll be back Friday. That's when the ruling takes effect. If you have the money then, this all goes away. If not..." He looked at Hope with genuine sympathy. "I'll have to enforce the court order. Take her back to Charleston." After he left, Logan and Hope sat in silence. $300. 5 days. "I have $47 saved," Logan said finally. "The tin under the floorboards. It's yours. All of it. That's not even a sixth of what we need." A knock on the door interrupted them. Logan opened it to find Mrs. Henley standing there with 4 other ladies from the church circle, each carrying covered dishes and wearing expressions of determined kindness. "We heard about the judge's ruling," Mrs. Henley said without preamble. "The whole town's talking. It's an outrage, is what it is. That man Blackwood coming here with his fancy clothes and his crooked legal papers. Mrs. Henley, we appreciate..." "Hush now, Logan Tate. Let me finish." She marched into the cabin, the other ladies following like a determined flock of hens. They set down their dishes, chicken pie, preserves, fresh bread, and then Mrs. Henley pulled a small cloth bag from her pocket. The ladies' circle took up a collection. Every woman in the church contributed what she could. She poured the contents on the table, silver coins, a few paper bills, even some copper pennies. Logan stared at the pile. "Count it," Mrs. Henley urged. Hope's fingers moved through the money with practiced efficiency. $89, she said softly. $89.35. "It's not enough. We know," one of the other ladies said, "but it's a start." Logan couldn't speak. These were farm wives, working women, people who counted every penny. $89 represented months of butter money, egg money, savings scraped together from household accounts their husbands barely knew existed. "We can't accept this," he managed finally. "You already have." Mrs. Henley patted his arm. "And don't you dare refuse. Hope's one of us now. We take care of our own." After the ladies left, Logan and Hope counted their total resources. $136.35, still more than 160 short. The sound of hoofbeats drew them outside again. Clayton Rivers rode up on his fine Morgan horse, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. He dismounted and pulled an envelope from his coat. Logan, Hope, he nodded to each. I heard about your situation. I'd like to help. Logan's jaw tightened. We're not accepting charity, Rivers. It's not charity. It's a loan. Rivers held out the envelope. $200. You pay me back when you can. Whatever terms work for you. No interest, no deadline. Just neighbors helping neighbors. I can't. Yes, you can. Rivers' voice was firmer than Logan had ever heard it. My father taught me that a man with resources has a duty to use them when he sees injustice. That Blackwood character and his bought judge, that's injustice. Pure and simple. Logan stared at the envelope, pride warring with desperation. $200 would more than cover what they needed, but accepting it meant admitting he couldn't protect his own wife, couldn't solve his own problems. Please, Hope said quietly. Logan, please, let him help. Rivers pressed the envelope into Logan's reluctant hand. Pay me back in timber if that makes it easier. I need quality lumber for a new barn anyway. We'll call it advance payment. After Rivers rode away, Logan stood on the porch holding the envelope like it burned his hands. Hope came to stand beside him. We have enough now, she said. We can pay Blackwood and be done with this. Logan didn't answer. He was staring at the mountains, at the timber stands he'd built over 3 years of solitary work. His life savings was in those trees marked, measured, ready for harvest. His future, such as it was. That night, while Hope slept in the loft, Logan made a decision. He pulled the timber claim deed from the shelf where he'd kept it safe, studied the official signatures and stamps. The land was his, bought and paid for, worth at least $400 if he sold it. Maybe more to the right buyer. He could sell the claim, pay off Blackwood, return Rivers' money, and still have enough left to start over somewhere else. It would mean losing everything he'd built, but Hope would be safe. That was all that mattered. At dawn, Hope found him at the table with the deed spread out before him. She looked at it, looked at him, and her face went pale. No. Her voice shook. Logan, no. You can't sell your claim. It's the only way to clear everything. Pay Blackwood. Pay Rivers back. Have enough to what, start over with nothing. You built this place with your own hands. It's your home, your work, your future, and you're my wife. Logan stood, facing her. What kind of husband would I be if I didn't do everything possible to protect you? What kind of wife would I be if I let you sacrifice everything for me? Hope's eyes blazed with sudden anger. I won't let you do this. I won't. It's not your choice. The hell it isn't. The profanity shocked them both. Hope never cursed. This is my life too, Logan Tate, our life. You don't get to make decisions like this alone. So what do you suggest? We have Rivers' money. We have the collection from the ladies. We have my savings. It's enough to pay Blackwood. But then I'm in debt to Rivers for years, and we're still struggling. So we struggle. Hope stepped closer, her hands fisted in her apron. We struggle together, as partners, as a married couple should. We don't give up everything we've built just because it's hard. This isn't about giving up. It's about you trying to protect me by destroying yourself. Hope's voice cracked. Don't you understand? If you sell this place, you'll resent me. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but eventually, you'll look at me and see everything you lost. That's not true, isn't it? She turned away, staring out the window at the mountains. I won't be the reason you lose your home, Logan. I won't carry that weight. They stood in angry silence, both breathing hard, both trying to protect the other in ways the other didn't want. Finally, A gentle knock on the door broke the tension. Reverend Michaels stood on the porch, his prayer book under his arm, and an expression of calm determination on his weathered face. "May I come in?" Over coffee, the Reverend listened as Logan and Hope explained their situation, the debt, the deadline, their limited options. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment, then smiled. "I think," he said gently, "you're both forgetting something important. You're not alone." "We know," Logan said. "The ladies helped, and Rivers offered. I'm not talking about charity or loans. I'm talking about community." Reverend Michaels set down his cup. "You're thinking like two people trying to solve a problem, but you're part of something larger now. This town, this church, we're family. And when family faces trouble, we come together. We can't ask people to. You're not asking. I'm telling you what we're going to do." The Reverend's voice held quiet authority. "Saturday, we'll hold a community gathering at the church grounds, a barn raising of sorts. But instead of a barn, we're raising funds. People can auction goods, services, whatever they want to contribute. The whole town will come." Hope looked skeptical. "That's 3 days away. And even if people wanted to help, they do want to help. They're already talking about it." Reverend Michaels stood. "Let them, Logan. That's what community means. Not just taking when you need, but accepting help with grace when it's offered." After he left, Logan and Hope stood on the porch as sunset painted the mountains in shades of copper and gold. Logan's arm settled around Hope's shoulders, and she leaned into him, both of them staring at the landscape they'd come to love. "I hate this," Logan said quietly. "Hate feeling helpless. Hate needing people." "I know." Hope turned in the circle of his arm, looking up at him. "But maybe that's the lesson. Maybe we're supposed to learn that needing people isn't weakness. It's just being human." Logan pulled her closer, resting his chin on top of her head. "If this works, if the community can actually raise that much, when it works," Hope corrected. "When it works," Logan amended. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. And them. You already do. You just don't see it yet." They stood together as darkness fell. Two people learning that strength sometimes meant admitting you couldn't do everything alone. That accepting help wasn't defeat, it was trust. And trust, they were both learning, was the strongest foundation of all. Inside, the kerosene lamp burned steady, casting warm light through the window. A beacon, perhaps. Or a promise that some lights kept burning even in the darkest nights. And Friday was still 3 days away. 3 days to learn what community really meant. 3 days to discover if hope the feeling, not just the name, could be enough. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. The kind of autumn day when the mountain air tasted like apples and wood smoke. Logan and Hope rode into town in their wagon, neither speaking much, both carrying the weight of what the day might bring. $347. That's what they needed, counting what they'd already gathered and what they still owed. The church grounds had been transformed. Long tables made from rough-hewn planks stretched beneath the cottonwood trees, already filling with donated items. Bunting in red, white, and blue hung from the branches, leftovers from Independence Day celebrations, pressed back into service. Paper lanterns dangled on strings, waiting for evening. At the center of it all stood a makeshift platform where Reverend Michaels was setting up an improvised auction gavel and axe handle wrapped in leather. People were arriving from all directions. Farm families in their Sunday best, men in stiff suits they wore once a week, women in bonnets with ribbons freshly pressed. Children ran between the tables, excited by the festival atmosphere. Logan recognized nearly everyone: the blacksmith and his wife, the feed store owner, the doc, even old prospector McCall, who lived up in the high country and rarely came down. Mrs. Henley bustled over as they climbed from the wagon. "There you are, Hope. Dear, come help me organize the quilts. We have 7, can you believe it? 7 women stayed up nights finishing them just for today." Hope followed Mrs. Henley to one of the tables where quilts were being displayed. Logan watched her go, saw how the other women gathered around her, touching her arm, offering words of encouragement. She'd been an outsider 3 weeks ago. Now they were folding her into their circle like she'd always belonged. Quite a turnout. Logan turned to find Clayton Rivers standing beside him, looking uncomfortable in an expensive gray suit. "Rivers, you didn't have to come." "Of course I did. Whole county's talking about it. That judge's ruling didn't sit well with folks. Smells of corruption." Rivers surveyed the growing crowd. "People want to help. Let them." The auction began at noon. Reverend Michaels stood on the platform, his voice carrying across the grounds. "Friends, neighbors, we're here today for one of our own. Hope Tate, who some of you remember from difficult circumstances, is now part of our community. And when one of us faces injustice, we all face it together." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "So let's show that fancy auction house what real community looks like. First item, this beautiful log cabin quilt, pieced by Mrs. Henley. Who'll start the bidding at $5, Vance?" Someone called from the back. "15 tom," countered another. The quilt sold for $32, 4 times what it was worth. Logan felt his throat tighten. These people weren't just buying quilts. They were buying Hope's freedom. Item after item went up for auction. Preserves sold for ridiculous prices, $5 for a single jar of blackberry jam. The blacksmith auctioned a year of free horseshoeing, which sold to Rivers for $40. Doc Bennett offered free medical care, purchased by the feed store owner for $35. A hand-crocheted tablecloth with delicate doilies went for $28. 2 farm boys, couldn't have been more than 10 years old, came forward with a cage of rabbits they'd trapped. "For the auction," the older one said solemnly. "We want to help Mrs. Tate." The rabbits sold for $12, a fortune for wild game. Logan watched the boys beam with pride as their father counted coins into their hands. Then came the moment that broke Logan completely. Mrs. Henley carried forward a silver tea service, ornate pieces with elaborate engravings, tarnished but beautiful. Logan recognized them from her parlor, where they'd always held a place of honor. "This was my mother's," Mrs. Henley announced, her voice wavering slightly. "Brought west on a wagon train in 1849. It's been in my family for 3 generations." She picked up a single serving spoon, held it to her chest. "I'll keep just this one piece for memory. The rest goes for Hope." "Mrs. Henley, no." Hope started forward, but the older woman raised her hand. "Yes, dear, absolutely yes." "Some things are more important than silver." The service sold for $97. Mrs. Henley walked down from the platform and handed the money directly to Hope, then pulled her into a fierce embrace. By mid-afternoon, the total had climbed past $200. Clayton Rivers stepped forward and announced he was purchasing Logan's marked timber at premium price, $165, with the condition that Logan would harvest and mill it at his convenience. "Consider it advance payment," Rivers said. "Fair price for quality lumber." The crowd cheered. Logan stood there, overwhelmed, trying to comprehend what was happening. These people, some he barely knew, were giving everything they had, not as charity, as family. Reverend Michaels called for a final count. Several men gathered around the collection table, coins clinking as they sorted and stacked. The crowd fell silent, watching, waiting. $347, the Reverend announced. "And 62 cents. The crowd erupted in cheers. Women hugged each other. Men clapped Logan on the back so hard he nearly stumbled. Children whooped and ran in circles. Hope stood in the center of it all, tears streaming down her face. She climbed onto the platform, and gradually the crowd quieted. "I don't—" Her voice broke. She tried again. "I don't have words for what you've done. When I came to this town, I was nothing, property to be bought and sold. But you—" She looked across the sea of faces. "You saw me. Not the auction girl, not the merchandise, just me. You gave me a name, a home, a place to belong. You gave me hope, the name, and the feeling. She found Logan in the crowd, held his gaze. And you gave me a husband who fights for me, who chose to see worth where others saw only trouble. She turned back to the community. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve this kindness. Thank you, all of you. Thank you. The crowd's response was immediate cheers, applause, tears. Logan pushed through to the platform and helped Hope down, and she collapsed into his arms, sobbing with relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. I told you, he murmured into her hair. You're not alone. We're not alone, she corrected. The sound of an approaching buggy cut through the celebration. The crowd parted, and Silas Blackwood drove through, his expensive buggy gleaming in the afternoon sun. He climbed down, smirking, clearly expecting to find failure and desperation. Instead, he found a community celebration. Mr. Tate, he said, his confidence faltering slightly. I've come to collect. I know why you're here. Logan stepped forward, and Sheriff Burrell handed him a leather pouch. Logan had counted it 3 times to be absolutely certain. He walked up to Blackwood and held out the pouch. $300. Exact amount. Count it if you want. Blackwood's smirk faded. He took the pouch, opened it, and began counting coins with increasing disbelief. The crowd watched in silence as he verified every dollar, every coin. This is... Blackwood looked around at the assembled townspeople, finally understanding what he'd walked into. The debt is paid, in full. Then we're done here, Sheriff Burrell said. You've got your money, now leave. But the court order is satisfied. The marriage stands. Hope Tate is legally married to Logan Tate, and your company has no further claim. The sheriff's hand rested on his gun belt. Unless you want to dispute that, I'm sure the territorial governor would be very interested to hear how your judge ruled on this case. Very interested indeed. Blackwood's face went pale. He climbed back into his buggy without another word, turned the horses, and drove away. The crowd watched until he disappeared down the mountain road, then erupted in cheers again. Reverend Michaels raised his hands for quiet. I believe this calls for a proper celebration, ladies. Let's get that food on the tables. Someone fetch a fiddle. We're going to have a dance. The afternoon dissolved into evening celebration. Tables groaned under potluck dishes, fried chicken, corn pudding, biscuits, pies made from the last of the summer berries. Old Prospector McCall produced a fiddle, and soon music filled the air. Couples lined up for square dancing, the caller's voice rising and falling over the melody. Virginia Reel partners, take your places. Logan found himself pulled into the dance by Mrs. Henley, who proved surprisingly spry for her age. Hope danced with Reverend Michaels, then Doc Bennett, then Rivers. Logan watched her laugh, truly laugh, her face bright with joy in the paper lantern light. When the fiddle switched to a slower tune, Logan finally claimed his wife. She came into his arms naturally, her hand in his, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. How are you holding up? He asked quietly as they swayed to the music. I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will all be a dream, that I'll still be in that cellar in Charleston, and none of this will be real. It's real. Logan pulled her closer. All of it, the community, the money, this dance, us. Us, Hope repeated softly. I like the sound of that. They danced as the harvest moon rose over the mountains, silver light mixing with golden lantern glow. Around them, their community celebrated not just Hope's freedom, but the reminder of what they could accomplish together. Rivers approached as the song ended, hat in hand. I'm heading out. Just wanted to say, you've got something special here. Logan, take care of it. I intend to. Logan shook his hand. And Rivers, thank you. For everything. Thank Hope. She's the one who brought this town together. We were all just waiting for something worth gathering for. As the evening wore on and families began loading sleepy children into wagons, Hope and Logan stood at the edge of the church grounds, watching people depart. Every family stopped to say goodbye, to offer final words of encouragement, to remind Hope she was welcome at church circle any time. Finally, they were alone. The lanterns had burned down to embers, and stars wheeled overhead in brilliant profusion. Logan helped Hope into their wagon, then climbed up beside her. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Hope smiled, leaning against his shoulder as he gathered the reins. "Yes, let's go home." They rode through the mountain darkness in comfortable silence, both carrying the warmth of what had happened. They'd gone to town as two people trying to solve an impossible problem. They were returning as part of something larger, a community, a family, a place where they truly belonged. And when Logan pulled the wagon into the clearing and helped Hope down, when they stood together on the porch looking at their small cabin with new eyes, they both understood something fundamental had changed. This wasn't just shelter anymore. It was home, and they had earned the right to call it that, together. 3 months later, the new house rose beside the old cabin like a promise kept. Logan had started framing it the week after the community gathering, working through the shortening autumn days with renewed purpose. Hope spent hours sketching designs on foolscap paper, a kitchen with a proper cast-iron cook stove, a sitting room with a stone fireplace, a bedroom with real glass windows. Logan would study her drawings, make adjustments for structural integrity, then build exactly what she'd imagined. The hollyhocks Hope had planted in spring now bloomed in profusion along the eastern side, tall stalks crowned with pink and white flowers that nodded in the mountain breeze. Morning glories climbed the split-rail fence she'd repaired, opening their blue trumpets to greet each dawn. The vegetable garden thrived under her care, rose neat and productive, yielding more than two people could possibly eat. Hope had started preserving the excess in mason jars, lining them on shelves Logan built in the new root cellar. On a crisp November morning, Logan stood back to admire his work. The house wasn't large, just 3 rooms and a covered porch, but every joint was true. Every board fitted with care. He'd carved their initials into the main porch beam where it met the roof support, LT plus HT, surrounded by a simple heart, not fancy, but permanent. Hope came to stand beside him, wiping flour from her hands. She'd been baking in the old cabin, filling it with the smell of bread one last time. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Better than anything I imagined." "You imagined it. I just made it real." "We made it real." She slipped her hand into his. "Together." That evening, as sunset painted the mountains gold and crimson, they stood in the old cabin one final time. Hope moved slowly through the small space, touching the Franklin stove where she'd learned to cook, the table where they'd shared countless meals, the rope bed frame with its star quilt. Logan watched her gather memories like flowers, storing them away. "I'll miss this place," she said, climbing down from the loft for the last time. "Is that strange? It's so small, so rough, but it was where we began." "It's not strange." Logan pulled her into his arms. "This cabin kept us safe while we figured out who we were, what we could be to each other." Hope packed their belongings carefully, the blue enamelware cups, the dishes, the mending basket, Mrs. Henley's shawl. Logan carried the heavy items, the Dutch oven, the coffee grinder, his tools. The star quilt he folded himself, reverently, thinking of his mother's hands that had stitched it. Last of all, he took his father's pocket watch from the shelf, but when he opened it, the hands were moving. 3:15 was long past. The watch ticked steadily, keeping proper time. Hope, she looked up from the basket she was packing, and her smile held secrets. "I took it to the watchmaker in town 2 weeks ago. Used some of the household money you gave me." She crossed to him, touched the watch gently. "Some things are worth repairing. You taught me that." Logan couldn't speak. He just pulled her close, the watch ticking against his chest like a second heartbeat, and held her while emotion washed over him in waves. When full dark fell, Logan did what he'd been planning since the day they married. He swept Hope up in his arms, ignoring her startled laugh, and carried her across the threshold of their new home, not because he had to, because he wanted to, because she was his wife in truth now, not just in law. Logan put me down. Not yet. He carried her through the front door, into the sitting room where a fire already crackled in the stone fireplace. There. Now it's official. Mrs. Tate has entered her house proper. Hope was laughing as he set her down, breathless and bright-eyed. You're ridiculous. You love it. I do. Her laughter faded into something softer, deeper. I really do. Logan gave her a tour as if she hadn't seen it 100 times during construction. The kitchen with its cast-iron cook stove new, with a warming oven Hope had specifically requested. The hand pump installed right at the sink, no more carrying water from outside. Wooden floors smooth enough for bare feet, not rough planks that caught splinters. Windows with real glass that let in light without drafts. The sitting room held the furniture Logan had built over the past months, 2 rocking chairs with curved arms and woven seats, a small table, shelves for books they didn't yet own but would someday. Above the fireplace, Hope's flower sketches hung in simple frames Logan had crafted. She stopped, staring at them. You framed them. You drew them. They deserve to be seen. Logan stood behind her, hands on her shoulders. You see beauty in everything. Hope, even broken-down lumberjacks, seemed right to honor that. The bedroom made Hope catch her breath. Logan had built a double bed, a real one, with a carved headboard and a frame that didn't creak. The star quilt was already spread across it, and beside the bed stood a small table with the kerosene lamp, its etched glass shade casting soft patterns on the walls. Rag rugs. Hope had braided covered the floor. White curtains she'd sewn from calico hung at the windows. There's still a loft, Logan said quietly. If you want separate sleeping space. I didn't presume. Hope turned to face him, and her eyes held something that made his breath catch. I don't want separate space anymore. Do you? No. The word came out rougher than intended. No, I don't. They stood in the doorway of their bedroom, their shared bedroom, while the weight of that decision settled between them, not forced by circumstance or community pressure, but chosen, freely, fully chosen. Logan cleared his throat. Should we? There's one more thing. Outside. He led her around to the south side of the house, where a small apple sapling waited in a burlap-wrapped root ball. A shovel stood ready beside it. Clayton Rivers gave it to me, Logan explained. From his orchard. Said every home needs an apple tree. Something that grows with the family, provides for years to come. He picked up the shovel, then offered it to Hope. Thought we'd plant it together. They dug the hole side by side, taking turns with the shovel. When it was ready, Logan lowered the sapling in carefully while Hope held it straight. Then Hope's hands covered his on the shovel handle, and together they filled the hole, packing earth around the roots. They worked without speaking, but words weren't necessary. The tree said everything: roots, permanence, fruit to come. When they finished, Hope fetched water from the pump and they watered the tree thoroughly. In the darkness, with only starlight and the glow from the windows behind them, they stood looking at what they'd planted. 5 years, Logan said. That's how long before it bears fruit. Maybe longer this high in the mountains. Then we'll wait 5 years. Or 10. We have time now. Hope leaned against him. We have a future. They sat on the new porch in the rocking chairs Logan had made, watching the last light fade from the mountains. The evening star appeared, brilliant against the darkening sky. Inside, the fire crackled. Outside, the night was full of cricket song and the whisper of wind through pines. Hope. I never thanked you properly for seeing something in me worth saving. She turned her head to look at him, You saved me first. No. Logan reached for her hand. We saved each other. That's the truth of it. I was drowning up here, alone with my guilt and my past. You gave me a reason to live instead of just exist. And you gave me dignity when everyone else saw property. Hope's fingers tightened on his. You gave me choice. A name I chose. A life I chose. A husband. She stopped, the words catching. A husband you what? Logan asked softly. A husband I love. She said it simply, without drama, like stating a fact as true as sunrise. I love you, Logan Tate. Not because you saved me, not because you married me, but because you're kind and honest and you carved my flower drawings into frames, because you work until your hands bleed to give me a home, because you let yourself need me as much as I need you. Logan stood, pulled her up from her chair, and kissed her, really kissed her, for the first time since their wedding. Not a brush of lips at the altar, but something real and chosen and full of promise. Hope made a small sound of surprise, then melted into him, her arms around his neck, kissing him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Logan rested his forehead against hers. I love you too. Took me too long to say it, but I do. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Hope Tate. The very best thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag. Inside was a ring real gold, delicate, with a tiny diamond chip. This was my mother's wedding ring, the real one, not the brass one I gave you at the ceremony. I had it sized for you in town. Been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Hope held out her hand, trembling slightly, and Logan slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, glinting in the starlight. She stared at it, then at him, tears tracking down her cheeks. I have something for you too. She disappeared into the house and returned with a small package wrapped in brown paper. Open it. Inside was his father's pocket watch, polished until it gleamed, the crystal replaced, the hands keeping perfect time. But when Logan turned it over, he found new engraving beneath his father's Logan and Hope. Forever begins here. The watchmaker added it, Hope explained. I told him what to write. I hope that's okay. I just wanted you to know that this isn't about what was lost anymore. It's about what we're building. Logan couldn't speak. He just pulled her close, the watch ticking steadily in his hand, and held her while the mountain night settled around them like a blessing. They sat back down in the rocking chairs Logan had carved, hands joined, watching the stars wheel overhead. The new house stood solid behind them, windows glowing warm. The apple tree waited in darkness, roots already beginning their work, growing down into mountain soil. What do you think? Logan asked. Should we have children someday? Someday? Hope agreed. When we're ready. When the house feels less new and more lived in. When the apple tree starts to bear fruit. That could be years. Then we'll wait years. She smiled at him. We have time now. All the time in the world. What if I'm not a good father? What if I'm too much like, you'll be wonderful? Hope's voice held absolute certainty. You'll teach them to build with their hands and see beauty in simple things and fight for what matters. You'll teach them that broken things can be repaired if you're willing to do the work. Logan squeezed her hand. And you'll teach them kindness, dignity, how to plant gardens and make homes and love with their whole hearts. They rocked together in comfortable silence, planning futures and dreaming dreams. Above them, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging. Below them, in the valley, the town slept. And here, on this porch, two people who'd been broken found wholeness in each other. Logan, Yeah. Thank you for choosing me. Not just once, at the altar, but every day since. Thank you for building this house with me, this life with me. Thank you for trusting me enough to stay, for seeing past the rough edges and the mistakes, for making this place feel like home. The moon rose, silver and full, casting light across their land, their house, their apple tree, their future, spreading out before them like an unmarked trail through virgin timber, uncertain but full of possibility. And as the night deepened and the fire inside burned low, Logan and Hope sat together in the chairs he'd made, wrapped in the life they'd built, understanding finally what it meant to belong, not to a place, not to a community, though that mattered, but to each other, completely, wholly, and forever. The bear trap that had brought them together seemed like ancient history, now a painful beginning to something beautiful. Hope had been caught, and Logan had freed her. But in freeing her, he'd freed himself too. From loneliness, from guilt, from the prison of believing he didn't deserve happiness. They'd both been trapped, and they'd both found freedom in the most unexpected way, not through escape, but through staying, through choosing each other, day after day, until choice became certainty and certainty became love. The wind moved through the pines like whispered prayers, and on the porch of their new house, two rocking chairs moved in gentle rhythm, keeping time with a pocket watch that finally, after years of silence, had learned to tick again. The end. 6 months after the community gathering, Logan and Hope stood in the churchyard after Sunday service, surrounded by friends who'd become family. Mrs. Henley fussed over Hope's new dress calico with blue flowers, sewn by her own hands. Clayton Rivers discussed timber prices with Logan. Their business relationship evolved into genuine friendship. The ladies' circle had adopted Hope completely, teaching her quilting patterns and sharing recipes passed down through generations. This was the true miracle, not just that Hope had been freed from the auction house's claims, but that both she and Logan had been freed from isolation. They'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness but wisdom. That community meant bearing one another's burdens. That gratitude wasn't just words but actions. Logan now helped neighbors with carpentry. Hope visited sick families with baskets of food. The bear trap had caught Hope's dress that morning months ago, but it was fear and shame that had truly trapped them both. Community love had opened those jaws, and they'd walked free together into a life richer than either had imagined possible. Sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into, it's the one that chooses you when you need them most. Have you ever been wrongly judged or treated as less than you are, like Hope was at the auction? How did you find your way back to dignity?